As I mentioned, I'm the oldest of six children as well. My family have played a really important role. But when people ask me, where does the leadership begin? I really think it begins at home and family. And it's just what are you doing every single day to make sure that you're reaching your goals? Sports was also a really big part of my life. So I've got to say, getting into sports and understanding that success does not happen overnight was also very important. So when I had these goals to be a leader, and in particular in politics, I also knew that I needed to put in the effort, make a good plan, and actually hold myself accountable to that plan as well. And so uh, finished my qualifications, did a lot of community service because I just loved it and I wanted Rotorua to be a better place, but also got involved in youth council. And so there are opportunities out there to sort of just get a foot in the door. And that was my foot in the door. And that's where I got to learn about council and also be surrounded by good, positive people that were actually going to get me to the places that I deserved to be. And eventually, when I turned 21, the council elections came around. And on my 21st birthday, I decided, you know what? Let's launch a campaign for council. And I can tell you what a ride that was. So we had to work incredibly hard. I was a student at the time, so I did not have as much money. But my community could see me out there dropping pamphlets in letterboxes, putting up billboards, and fortunately for me, the community gave me a chance. But I've got to admit that when I decided to stand for council and to get into politics, I had this conversation with my mother where I said, I don't know if people are going to support me. I don't know if people are going to vote for me. She sort of looked at me knowing this has been my lifetime dream. And I was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, because I'm young, I'm Māori, and I'm female. And at the time, there was not many people of any of those categories, let alone the trifecta, that were in politics at the time. And fortunately, Mum, I remember she looked me dead in the eye and she was like, that is exactly why you need to be there. And that was when I first learned about reframing. And I thought, gosh, here I was thinking this was a weakness or a disadvantage. And actually, this is my superpower. This is my strength. And and that was so awesome. And the amount of times I've used reframing, as soon as I start thinking, oh, and a bit like thinking negatively, and even every single day in my job as me now, instead of thinking, oh man, I have to do another 12-hour day of meetings and now I got to go to this event later, I get to, how lucky am I that I get to work so hard, that I get to walk into this building, go into my community, speak at amazing events in the evening, and it just really changes. When you change the narrative that's happening in your head, I guarantee it's going to change the narrative in your reality, what's happening in your life as well. So that's how I kind of got into politics. I was on council for 9 years, but I've also got to say the thing with being a woman in these roles is what are we doing to pave the way for success for others to come through? And at times, women were a barrier. They were the ones that were a little bit older and kind of going, oh, who's this young girl that doesn't have any experience? But more often than not, women were the ones who could see, oh, I think she might be struggling a little bit, and would just have those little side conversations with me, like, how's everything going? Like, speak up. And that's how I started my council time. And then another woman came into my life, and her name was Karen Hunt, and she was my council mum. And I don't know if you've ever been this person or had these fantastic people, but these are the people that really play like a motherly role, where they see you coming through an industry, through a challenge, through your community, and they go, you know what, I'm just going to back this person 100%. And the thing about giving support is it doesn't take anything away from the opportunities that you have. And that was a really valuable lesson that Karen gave me. So she would always support me no matter what I needed. But she also wasn't afraid to put me first as well, to put me in front of her, to give me opportunities instead of trying to take all the opportunities herself. She would always encourage me to get involved, even if that meant that she had to step back because there might have only been opportunity for one seat at that table, as an example. But through my council experience, what did really concern me was when I first got in council, there were three people that had been there at the time longer than I'd been alive. And in reflection, I thought to myself, I think I believe in limited terms in leadership, but also what are we doing to make sure that other people are able to come through? And there's a perfect art in timing in coming into things powerfully and then leaving things gracefully. So I'll also put that there as women and as leaders, we get this fantastic opportunity to be in this space. But the success at the end of it won't necessarily be what did I do in my time? It will be what did I do to make sure that there were other women who were able to come into this space, that those challenges, those barriers were bowled down, burnt down, whatever, and that I know that I supported them through this journey, even if at times that meant that I was putting them first before my own needs. And you do need to look after yourself, but we also need to make sure that everything that we do and we say, is it impacting other people in a positive way or a negative way? Because I will also be honest, I have had to deal with some pretty nasty, terrible, horrible verbal comments, social media. It's horrendous. And when I was going through a really hard time in politics, because the thing about being in leadership is no one ever really calls you to say thanks for what you're doing. They're going to call you and say, or they're going to write on Facebook and go, oh, but you still suck and you should have done it this way. And one day when I was just in the real midst of despair, and it was just really terrible, terrible time on social media. And I opened up one of my notebooks and I came across a page where I had jotted down a note. And that note said, don't get distracted, focus on what's important. And I realized, oh, I was so distracted by reading all those nasty Facebook comments that I was forgetting to put all my time and energy into what's actually important, helping my community, helping these people, even if they're being nasty, but actually focus on what's important. So I wanted to share that with you all as well, as if you're going through any challenging time, take a moment to think, am I being distracted from where I need to be, from where I deserve to be? And I'm going to focus on what's important. And what's important is even taking little steps every single day to get there instead of focusing on all of the naysayers that aren't going to get you anywhere positive in life anyway. So it can be really hard and challenging mentally. If I was to tell my 21-year-old self getting into politics how strong she will be in the midst of despair and when so many personal attacks get thrown your way, I think I probably would have run. I probably would have turned around and run the other way. No, I'm just kidding. I would be incredibly, incredibly proud of myself. And it takes a moment sometimes to just stop and reflect on the journey that you've been on, to feel really grateful. So I do every single day in my role as mayor. I walk into this office and I think I'm so grateful to be here. And that gratefulness is also a reminder of not only where I've come from, but how much further I've still got to go. And so I do acknowledge the many other women that are in politics. We do cop a lot. There has definitely been research and studies that show that we are unfortunately the victims of a lot more hate and at times violent threats. Those are certainly things that I've received. But again, I don't get distracted by it. I stay focused on what's important because I know that it's important that we are in these spaces, that we hold space and that we make space for other women as well. So I've probably talked enough so far. That was my journey, some of the key lessons. But I am incredibly excited to share this with you all and answer any questions later too. Thank you.
Well, Tania, thank you so much. I mean, that was just such an important, so many important messages that you just shared just then. And I'm writing down furiously some of the things that you talked about. I'd love to come back to some of these things, especially around things like, the finding your superpower. And it seems to come from passion, a real passion for what you do and for making sure that your community is being given the opportunities to be the best that it can be. I thought that was fantastic. And there was also something you said around strength. And it kind of got me to thinking, and I will pose this question to you both. Do you think sometimes that as a woman in a particular position, you actually need more strength than if it was someone else, like a man in the same role? It kind of feels like because you've got so many other things to be dealing with and managing, and so we'll definitely come back and look at that. Josie, thank you again so much for being part of today. We're so thrilled to have you. Your story, I'm assuming, is going to be very, very different to Tanya's. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, Tania, what an amazing story. And mine certainly is different. And I thought I'd take people on a bit of a journey of how I ended up in motorsport and then the significant shock to my system coming from not-for-profit into this incredibly male-dominated industry, as you've said, but only in the racing side because there's so many females behind the scenes. But the shock of knowing nothing about the industry and actually having to prove myself to a group of people, not only in motorsport, but also in tourism. So one of the biggest shocks to my professional life was I'd been in the role at Highlands for about 6 weeks. Tony Quinn was and is my boss. He owns Highlands, Taupo and Hampton Downs Motorsport Parks. And he came into the office and he said, "You're a disappointment and I think I've made a big mistake." And it was July 2013 and it was 6 weeks after I'd started work at Highlands. And I will take you back to 2013 now. Indulge me. Highlands had just opened in Cromwell. I was working for Cure Kids and I was sitting on the bank with my husband and my 3-year-old daughter. And we were watching these cars go round the track. And I turned to him and I said, "I can't believe I'm not part of this." I had no interest in motorsport, but I was captivated and intoxicated by this facility from day one. And I was looking to leave Cure Kids. I'd been there 12 years. I loved it deeply, but I was looking to leave for several reasons, and that's probably another speech for another time. But one of the main reasons was I knew my daughter was going to be starting school. I was traveling a lot and I wanted to be based in Cromwell so I could be there to support her when she was finishing school because she would travel with me with Cure Kids as well because my husband was working away. So Mitch actually said, "Give them a call." And so I did. And I picked up the phone on Monday and I gave them a call and I asked them if they had any jobs going. And I knew a woman involved in it. And I got a really snippy no. It was like I was asking her that I was going to come in and take over her role. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I got on with life. But about 6 weeks later, I got a phone call to come and meet a gentleman called Tony Quinn. And so I did. And 2 hours later, I actually left with a job as his business development manager. So that was amazing. Here I was. And here we are now in July 2013. I'd been there for 6 weeks, and Tony's just told me, he's called me into the office, told me that I'm not meeting his expectations. I'm on one of those 90-day things, and he was worried that he'd made a big mistake. And I was so taken aback and totally surprised because I was in there working hard, doing my best, remembering I've only been there 6 weeks. I was learning an entirely new industry. The business was brand new. He was based in Australia, so he was fly in, fly out. We were a whole new team, making it up as we went, and we were flying by the seat of his pants. And here he was, a gentleman, self-made, very successful, very accomplished. And in my mind, when he was telling me that I wasn't meeting his expectations, I went straight to, I'm a failure. And it was such a key lesson, a real lesson that I learned in life, in business, is that there is nothing wrong with open, honest feedback. But it's also important to deliver it with a touch of empathy. But what's also important, and it's something I've learned along my journey, is it's so important to take things professionally, not personally. And the higher you become in leadership, unfortunately, it seems particularly for females, but you do see it across the board, the more personal it becomes, the more successful you become. So at that time, though, I didn't know all of this. I've been at Highlands for 12 years now, but I was beside myself. I went bright red, my hands were shaking, I physically felt sick, and I am a natural crier. And I was very surprised that I didn't cry at that time. But I asked why. And because, I did want to know why I wasn't meeting these expectations. His feedback was that he'd hired me to sell membership and build the membership and sell signage, and that I'd only got one member and there were no sales. And I explained that I was trying to do everything else. I was trying to get some systems in place at Highlands. We were running around like headless chickens, trying to build the culture, trying to empower the team, because I'd come from a leadership role in Cure Kids. And his feedback was that that's not what I was employed to do, and get out there and sell the signage and the membership. He's the boss, and I needed to do what he'd asked, but I also knew all of the other aspects that needed to be done, and I knew in my heart of hearts that what I felt was also right. So what I did at that moment was I split my day up, 70% about doing what he needed the business to do, because he had decades of experience and I respected that, but also 30% of what I knew the business needed to do as well. I told him that he wouldn't have to have that conversation with me again. And then he was like, "You're damn right. Well, I won't. So get out there and do it." It was really difficult at work because I was a social leper. No one really wanted to be associated with the person who had just had a rack up for the box from the boss. But the next day when he came to work, he came and he asked me what I needed from him to help achieve in my role. And that made a significant difference for me. He took me around the site, showed me how to break down the signage, and gave me the tools that I actually needed to be able to get started. Momentum from there followed. I was determined to prove that I was the right person for the job. So there wasn't sulking, there wasn't harboring any angst. It was about getting on with the job at hand. I now celebrate in July 12 years at Highlands. As you've said, I run 6 of Tony's companies in New Zealand. I am able to make a difference in the communities that we have the privilege of operating in, through a mental health program for the Cromwell schools here. We support Cactus in Taupō, and we have the Tony Quinn Foundation, which has invested almost $3 million into young Kiwi men and women achieving their dreams in motorsport. And we've achieved a lot in a very short amount of time. So I've learned a lot of things over the 12 years. And, when I think about it, the decade and a bit has just gone so quickly. But I've not only learned it from TQ, I've learned it from the people that I have the absolute privilege of being able to work with. And so much of what I've learned, and it's to what Tania said as well, it's about not being afraid to have the conversation, to talk about the elephant in the room, to raise it, to deal with it, and then to be able to move forward. I've also learned the power of belief, both in yourself, but also the power of others believing in you. And we have a very similar theme when we talk about our leadership positions. That's been my overwhelming experience of being a woman in leadership. And I've reflect that I am very privileged because I have my entire career had some wonderful champions fiercely in my corner, believing in me when I perhaps didn't believe in myself. I've never once had to question in my life whether I can do a job because I'm female. I have never had to ask that question. And I think that we are so fortunate because we live in this incredible country where we are so much more progressive than so many other other countries. But I also realize that my experience isn't necessarily the majority's experience, but at least we are getting somewhere that some women can stand up in New Zealand and say, I've never had to question my seat at the table because I have a JJ. So I feel really very privileged for that. Our companies in New Zealand, so for the 3 motorsport parks, all 3 of them have females in leadership. Our GM at Hampton Downs is Deborah Flula. She is a phenomenal woman, another female with no motorsport background whatsoever. Heather Lindsay here at Highlands is my operations manager. And then we have Mark Flula. So our actually only male GM in the group is based at Taupo Motorsport Park. Our split in the businesses, which I think people will find really interesting, is actually 60% female and 40% male. So for a conception where motorsport is inherently a very male-dominated industry, we actually have a lot of females, incredibly talented females across all aspects of the group, including our own driver, Rhianna O'Meara Hunt, who's actually in Europe at the moment. But she was our first female driver appointed at Highlands in 2022. I know for me, when I'm recruiting for skills, for talent, and for ability. Sex doesn't come into it. However, it's very important, I believe, to have an organisation where you've got balance of both because you bring strengths and weaknesses. I have come from a very female-dominated industry and not-for-profit. There are a lot of women involved in that. And I certainly, through the years have discovered it's getting easier, but we lead with emotion, we lead with empathy. And perhaps one of it's not a weakness, but we're naturally bent to it, or I certainly am, is that I do take things personally. Whereas and I've learned to take it professionally, but some of the challenges in a very female-dominated environment can become all about the emotion, and we sometimes forget about what we're actually trying to achieve. So that balance has certainly has helped. The key thing, and to Tania's point, that I've also learned is about cheerleaders. The more trusted cheerleaders I have in my corner, the greater my tenacity, the higher my courage. And I've been fortunate, as I've said, to have so many champions in my corner, from my husband to my past bosses, both female and male, my parents. And the more someone believes in me, it powers me. And that's what gives me my superpower, because I believe that I can actually achieve things that other people believe are impossible. And one of my favorite quotes is that it always seems impossible until it is done. And I think so much of what we've achieved in the industry in New Zealand is a testament to that. Resilience is incredibly important, and being a woman in an older dominated industry as well as male. I was a young woman with no motorsport experience. And I think part of the resistance that I received in the early days was actually my lack of understanding of motorsport. And they were there's a core group of, and it's older men, who were really indignant of why would Tony Quinn be putting this young charity worker in this position when all of these people know so much and they've been here forever. And that's become an absolute power within our business, because I wasn't afraid to ask the question, why? Why do we keep doing this? Because the whole industry had become so beholden on, we just keep doing the same thing. It was the old boys network, it was tied down, and we were able to, break the ceiling, so to speak, and change things up because we didn't need to be part of that network. The social media, I've been lucky with that. We did do some toilets in 21 in COVID, and that created a little bit of angst with quite a few Americans, because there might be a toilet there that resembles a certain member of parliament in the USA. And so I got some pretty vile abuse from that. The biggest challenge that I had was in COVID, when we supported the vaccine pass, and it was optional at the very start. And we simply said, if you showed your card, you got a free museum entry. We wanted to play our part in the community. And the attack and the abuse was fast, swift, and sustained. And Tania, I take my hat off to what I see politicians, particularly female, have to go through on that social media landscape particularly. It is abhorrent, and I do my best to be a voice to stand up and try and take the power away from those people that believe it's their God-given right to write whatever they think in their nasty little minds. So I think the more we can do, and I appreciate not focusing on the negativity, but the more we actually do as a society to stand out and call that abhorrent behaviour out, the bigger chance we have of changing it for future people, for future women, for our children coming through, where they're not going to be afraid to put themselves in positions of leadership and of profile because of fear of the absolute disgust that comes through these social media channels. So I feel very passionately about that, but I'll sum it up. There's a couple of key lessons that I'd say. I strongly, strongly believe that breaking barriers isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right and your belief in yourself. Confidence isn't always knowing the answer. I have lived by this. If someone offers you an amazing opportunity and you don't know how to do it, say yes and figure the rest out later. Leadership isn't about the plan, it's about the journey, and it's about making decision after decision after decision. And if you make the wrong one, don't worry, make another one and hope for the best that that's the right one, and just keep going. And that is one of the most powerful things I tell the team. I don't care what the decision is, I care that you make it. I trust that 95% of the time you're smart. That's why we've employed you. You're going to make the right one. If you make the wrong one, don't worry. Just don't be afraid to make another one. Don't sit in the worry of the wrong decision. Don't fear the mistake. Just keep making the next step on the journey. Never underestimate the power of a good team. Surrounding yourself with the right people is absolutely critical. And don't wait for permission to step up. If you want something, whether it's a career, a changing career, a leadership role, go for it. Because if you wait for somebody else to be validating you, you will be waiting forever. And work hard. Be the hardest worker in your team. Great success does not come from working 9 to 5. I've worked really hard and my success is because of that. But also it's because of the people that have believed in me, that have ultimately enabled me to believe in myself. And my hope for the team is that the belief that we install in them gives them the strength, whether it comes from within them, from their mentors, or even from a slightly but well-meaning shove from me in the right direction, that they can find their own place in their career as well. So that's me, bit of a summary.
Josie. That's great. No, there's some great lessons there, and I love the piece around the power of belief, because I think as you know, irrespective of who you are, if you don't have that innate sense of belief in your own abilities to just kind of get through some of these hurdles, get through some of these roadblocks, get past some of the comments that may be made online. Those people don't know you.
No.
They're keyboard warriors. They don't know you. They don't know what drives you, but you know yourself what it is that gives you the impetus to get up every morning. And Tania, to your point, looking at what it is and being so grateful for being given the opportunity to do the jobs that you do. So thank you so much. What we're going to do now, I'm now going to bring Nikki into the fold. And Nikki's going to just monitor and help me with the Q&A. You'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you've got any questions, please pop them in that Q&A box, and we will we'll ask Tania and Josie to give some responses to that. But I'm just going to kick us off with a couple of questions. I will be honest, as a good facilitator does, questions have been pre-given so that our panelists get an opportunity to think about them. But I'm not necessarily going to go in order, if that's okay, because one of the things I just wanted to ask you was, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about women in leadership positions? And Tania, I'll kick off with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the big misconceptions is that we may not be experienced enough, or we may not be as strong or as direct as males. And it is such a misconception. And I'll give you an example. When I was speaking at Chamber of Commerce events leading up to Standing For Me, and the amount of times that people would say, oh, but we really need someone who has business experience. And I'll go, oh, well, that's weird, because I've worked at Deloitte and also BNZ Business Partners. Oh, but we really need someone with business qualifications. Oh, okay, well, I've actually had a Bachelor of Management Studies, and I'm the most qualified person out of all the candidates in business. And I just thought it was such a interesting real life experience of what often happens when people just perceive that women may not be as qualified or as experienced as men. But in reflection, I realized that reality is we're not as good at talking about it. So we can be very humble in nature, and you can guarantee that the guy next to you is not being humble at all. In fact, he's like probably way oversold what he's actually done. And so what I often ask myself sometimes when people ask me a question and I think, oh, how am I going to respond to that? And it sounds weird, but I think, if I was an older male, what would I have said? Or if I was an older male, would that have been weird for them to ask me that? And if the answer is yes, then I just give an even stronger reply, a smile. So there's always I would just encourage everyone to, when we talk about equality, if you're finding yourself in a situation where and your instinct is saying, I don't think they would have talked to me like that or thought of me like that if I was a male, use it to push back. And sometimes I even say to them, I go, oh, what do you mean by that? And I love it, because you sort of see them start to squirm because they realize, oh, yeah, actually, that was a little bit sexist. So anyway, have fun with that one. But it is a misconception, and we can do better to promote all the great things that we have done.
Josie, would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the things that are said to me and I've often kicked back, certainly not afraid to. And I will quite blatantly say to them, if Tony Quinn was sitting here, would you ask him the same question? And you can see the whites of their eyeballs. And I can remember a situation. I was closing a big deal, and Tony happened to be there. And I said, "Look, come along with me." We had Hampton Downs by this stage, um, and I could see that the person that I was negotiating with was really trying to, put their peacock feathers out in front of Tony Quinn and kind of diminish me. And it was a six-figure sum deal. And in the end, he leaned across, he looked me in the eye and he said, "Oh, wow. If you're going to look at me with those doe eyes, how can I say no?" And I, quick as you like, put my hand across the table. I said, "You can't," shook his hand and said, "Deal done." And he just had nowhere to go. And I was like, "Bugger you. You want to look like an old, pale, male, stale dude? Fill your boots. I've just got six figures off you, and you look like an absolute fool in front of the person you're trying to impress."
Though, I'd also suggest that sometimes we've got to be a little bit careful that women don't do that to us as well, because I've been in situations where I've had a male boss, but ultimately, everything would sit with me. But another woman passed me by and went straight to my boss to try and get something done.
Yeah.
And I knew why they were doing it. And, so we this whole conception of we can't be approached, or we've got to try and get this with a little bit of one-upmanship. It's takes too much energy. It's pointless.
I think it says more about the character of other people than it does
That's
about,
true.
And ultimately it will end up, they'll be the product of their own demise. The other thing that I would say that I've certainly seen is a misconception is that mums can't be leaders. That if we have children and we
hello.
can't, that we can't dedicate ourselves to our careers, that we can't be as effective as someone who doesn't have children. And I just find that such a incredibly old school way of thinking. And for us in the business, we have several mums that have, staff that have gone on to be mums. I always do ask, it's highly, highly inappropriate, but I'm like, what, when we're in an interview, what's your plans for children, to see how we can structure it along the way. But I had Georgia when I was at Cure Kids. She was a huge part of is a huge part of our life at Highlands. We have more kids here, I think, than we have adults at the moment with the amount of children coming into our businesses. But mums make wonderful leaders.
I should jump in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
I ended up accidentally doing a Jacinda Ardern, and the same week as the election, my husband and I found out that we were expecting our first child. I do have a stepson, but it was our first child, and it was just such a magical moment where I was like, "Wow, no matter what, I'm going to have the most important job in the world, and that's to be a mum." And having carried my baby and having the pregnancy while being in my first few months as mayor, and I've got to be honest, I was really grateful there was a bathroom not too far from my office, because but the strength of women that we can go through pregnancy, we can keep working, it was incredible. But it also became my superpower because I was pregnant and carrying my baby, and I'm working in this very stressful environment. And I knew that I couldn't let any of that stress get through to me, to my baby, because I don't want any of those bad chemicals making her be born a really stressed person. And so I could be sitting in a meeting that was probably a bit horrible, but I just had the sense of calm because I was like, I don't got time for that. I'm growing this baby and I'm going to do a great job on that. So, but it made me do such a good job as mayor. And now that I've have her as a leader, they just bring so much more meaning and purpose to your life. And what I did really love is that being able to show people that actually we can do it all. And I've had a number of staff who also recently had babies, but they actually shared with me that it was so meaningful for them to see me walking around very pregnant, but also having the baby in the office every now and then, because they felt that it was acceptable to them as well, like that they could. And that's when I really realized as a leader, we also have a responsibility, because whether we realize it or not, we are setting the standards. And so when I'm setting the standard that it's okay to pop out of the meeting because you need to breastfeed your baby, or it's okay to, like bring your baby in because they're sick and your husband's busy. And yeah, we just need to normalize that we can do it all, and we do a really good job of it.
Absolutely. Hey, Nikki, I see we've got a couple of questions coming through. Do you want to perhaps just share those with us?
Question and one fabulous comment that I'm just going to share very quickly. You've probably seen it already from the lovely Megan in Christchurch. Absolute powerhouse, inspirational, impressive pair. Thank you. And Josie, she'd never been on a webinar where the word for JJ was used. So I had to share that. But a question from Xanthi at Sedema Hotels as well. One for you as well, Josie, because you mentioned controlling your emotions, or maybe not controlling them. So she's just saying, do you have any advice about how to get yourself under control when you are frustrated and emotive?
Yeah, look, there's two things there. I think emotions in a workplace are really important, and that they shouldn't be discouraged. And I've had, unfortunately, we've gone through two fatalities at Hampton Downs. There's a really, serious nature to my role in motorsport. There's a high risk. These were on motorbikes, and I can remember after our first fatality, and I had been with the team at Hamptons. I'd gone to the funeral. I'd come back to the team at Highlands, and I was really deeply impacted by it, and not to take away from the family's grief and their journey for the rest of their lives without their daughter. But it was really important to me that I shared that with the team, and I wanted to take them through the experience that we'd had. I was so emotional and upset, and it actually showed the team that that's 100% okay, that we care deeply, we're passionate. I am only human, and we don't need to have this tough exterior as leaders. If people are upset, let them be upset in an environment. Don't apologize for it. And if you can't quite get your emotions under control because it's really impacted you, ask for 5 minutes. Just say, look, I need to go. I've got to gather my thoughts. Give me 5 minutes and I'll be back. But do not be embarrassed about it. And don't try and hide it. It's completely natural.
I remember once having a male leader who had to tell me to do something which was pretty tough, and something I cared about deeply. And his closing words to me, and don't cry. Nobody likes to see a crier. I'm a crier. And I remember how that made me feel. It made me feel very, very worthless. And it made me sort of think, well, but I care about this. So yeah, it's not about whether you cry or whether what you do. It's about showing that's your empathy, and it is absolutely okay to be emotional about things that you care deeply about. We have got 5 more minutes to go, so and I do want to be respectful of time. So I'm going to actually ask you both one more question, and let's see if we can perhaps get a couple of minutes from you both on this one. And it's really about what are your hopes? What is your desires? What is your dream for the future of women in leadership and with empowerment? What would you like to see ultimately and ideally? Tania?
Look, this is a really good question, because I think that we're not asked it enough, actually. As well as all the negative things that happen in life and all the challenges, there are also some fantastic opportunities. My hopes and dreams for other women in leadership is that they never ever have to think that it's a weakness, that they know that being a woman is their strength, that they know that having emotional intelligence is just as important as anything else. And also, if we do, or they do, my hope is that if women are facing criticism, if they're facing hateful, hurtful comments because they are a woman, that they know that they actually are not only deserving and worthy of being in the positions that they are, but actually they're going to do a hell of a great job. And I think imposter syndrome is something that a lot of women feel, and I don't want any of them to ever feel like that. And also, yeah, just there is no place for discrimination based on gender. But I do want to just leave with probably a hot tip for everyone on controlling emotions, because there's definitely sometimes, like I know when I had a call as mayor because our bank was being held up, or when we had a multi-million-dollar facility and the show was about to start, and then all of the technical just went haywire and we had to cancel the show last minute and people turned up. Moments like this, when your emotions can be quite high, what I do is I just, deep breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, and just grounding yourself. And the other hot tip is use your senses. So it's not just about the emotions you're feeling, but I'll just think, okay, what can I see? What can I hear? What can I feel? What can I taste? And that's another way to just ground you into the moment that you're in right now. Because a lot of the emotions that we feel when you're really emotive, whether it's anger or sadness or grief, it's you're thinking about something that's happened in the past or something that's about to happen in the future. It's just making you really anxious or nervous. And just grounding yourself in where am I at right now? How can I focus on making this the best moment is really helpful. And I hope that that actually helps you guys as well if you ever go through any emotional times.
I love that. I'm going to take that one on board, especially that taking a deeper breath in and getting yourself regrounded, I think is absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Tania. Josie, what's your sort of hopes and ambitions for the future for women?
I hope that there isn't one day we're not talking about women in leadership and the challenges that we have. I hope that I'm invited to come to panels to talk about the difference between my style of leadership and the difference between my male counterpart style of leadership, and both are celebrated equally as well.
That's beautiful, beautifully done. Ladies, thank you so much for being part of today. Thank you to everyone who's joined us online. We really, really appreciate this. And I hope you all have taken something from this. You've learned something. My God, we could sit here for hours, I think you would agree, in almost like a masterclass with these two exceptional women. Tania, thank you so much again for all the support that you've given the team in Rotorua, the whole community, the extraordinary feeling of manaakitanga that you always bring when you are engaged with us, and we really appreciate it. We'll never ever forget how special our meetings in Rotorua was and the role that you play. Josie, it's been a while. I haven't been down to Central, but I promise you I am coming down to see you real soon. Thank you again for your support of the business events industry, for really, really working with the teams down in Taupo and in Central Otago, for making sure that people understand what incredible facilities we have in this country. I'm now just going to close out with a closing karakia. Ka whakaria te tapu, kia watia, ai te ara. Kia te ruku whakataha ai. Kia te ruku whakataha ai. Humie, huie, takie. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. It's Friday. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us. All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.